The blade snaps the rope. Dust blooms. Breath returns. Jay stands in the barn with a knife in his fist. The noose, dead at his boots. A pigeon beats from the rafters. The knot lies like a pale coin on the packed floor. Ruth steps from the stall. Doorway. Coat tight, eyes steady. Mud stains one knee, like she went down, and rose decided. You were going to do it, Jay says. I was going to be done with being a ghost. She moves closer, close enough to smell rope on him. The barn holds their silence. He stares at the scar, his blade left in the beam. You saw me. I saw a man halfway gone. Why ask me to stay? The question leaves his mouth like a breath he forgot to hold. The house outside feels like a throat that won't swallow him. Because you're used to being hated without reason, she says. Wind pushes through a crack and rattles a latch. Outside, a badge nailed to a post ticks in the wind like a metronome. They call me liar, whore, thief, she says. Pick one. I don't pick men's names for women. You'll say that when they crowd you. I'll say it when I'm alone. He pockets the knife. His hand shakes. He grips a post until the tremor burns out. I have a price for living, she says. I can't pay it alone. He waits. He knows prices that arrive at night and sit at tables where chairs are still warm. A marriage done by paper at dawn. Stand with me in the place they can't ignore. Not a bed, not a ring, a wall that can breathe. She watches his face. I need a wall that breathes. Be that. His heart kicks. You need protection. I need witness. Men do worse in the open when they think nobody will write it down. Who is they? Neighbors, deputies, men who borrow their wife's voice to sound kind. She doesn't look away. You think you're the only one who wanted a quick end. He studies the cut rope. He hears the badge tick, a steady false time. If I say yes, I'm here when they come. If you say yes, you walk to town in daylight. If you say no, you leave a house with only women inside. We both know how that ends. Why me? Because men want me, or want to own me. You want sleep. Earn it by facing them. He lets out a dry breath. You think marriage is sleep? I think paper is a door that opens into town, not out. She sets her jaw. Let my ghosts crowd yours back. You'll have a man who doesn't. Run. Then we wait for light. We lay the rope in the hearth. We eat. We breathe like we mean it. He picks up the noose. The fibers scrape his palm. There's coffee in the house. Then pour it. I'll watch the yard. They step into night. The badge on the post ticks, metal to wood. At Ruth's porch, he sees boot scuffs that aren't his, pressed deep. Turning at the step like a man paced there to count courage. He wants to scrub them. He leaves them so truth can stand where it stands. Inside, the house is spare. A table. 2 chairs. A stove with a low red mouth. No pictures. He sets the kettle. Ruth leans on the doorframe, coat still on. If we do this, it's tomorrow, she says. First office. First clerk who can't ignore us. Clerk will ask why. He'll ask, are we sure? Her mouth makes a crooked line. I'm done asking to be believed. He pours. The smell steadies him. You keep a clean table. I keep only what can move fast. Her eyes flick to his hands. You shook. I stopped. He lifts the cup. Pride is a coat, she says. Warm. Useless when it rains. They drink. The shelf clock is dead. The ticking in the yard stands in for time. They'll call me names too, he says. They already do. Drifter cowhand, without a rope. Traitor 2 men. I've been called worse, by better. Then you understand. She slides bread across the table. Eat. He chews until his jaw stops buzzing. The room settles. Tell me what they did. Later, after paper. So it counts. He nods. They sit until the kettle cools, and the windows show a thin, cold blue edge of morning. Sleep on the floor by the door, she says. I will. If they come tonight, we wait. If they shout, we don't. We don't. He lies down with his coat on. Ruth sets a chair near him and faces the door. He hears her breathe like someone holding a rope across a river. He keeps his palm on the knife and watches the dark brighten by inches. Gray dawn comes. They walk the road with the rope wrapped in cloth like trash. The office door sticks. He shoulders it open. The clerk looks up. Pen ready. You sure? The clerk says, We're sure, Jace says. Ruth doesn't blink. The clerk scratches lines on a sheet and turns it. Jace reads nothing. He signs his name like pulling a nail. The paper gleams with wet. Bootsteps gather on the boards outside, quick and certain. The first fists hit the door. They come. Knocking turns to pounding. Jace keeps his palm on the fresh paper while the ink shines. Ruth's breath stays even. The door shakes again. He looks at her. She nods. He unlatches the chain and braces the wood so it opens as far as he allows and no farther. Sheriff Brand waits on the porch with 4 men. Their saddles in the yard carry the old family brand, a cattle sigil like a hooked smile. Bad day for a wedding, Brand says. Good day for stopping rot, Ruth says. Jace keeps the door tight with his hip. You got paper? Brand shows empty hands. Boots. The men lean to see past Jace. Ruth doesn't move. You bring a price, Jace says. Brand tips his hat at Ruth. Ma'am, I wish you joy, and you're not. Wish yourself a job that matters, she says. Brand glances at Jace's dull revolver on the table. Gun's asleep. It wakes, Jace says. We're not here to rough you, Brand says. We're here to help you understand what you did. Ruth folds the new paper and slides it into her pocket. We understand. Marriage changes, claims, Brand says. Yours were messy. Now they're art. It makes me a wall, Jace says. Walls fall, Brand says. Your men walked my kitchen last winter, Ruth says. We were checking the stove, Brand says. You checked her bed, Jace says. We were seeing if you kept rumors, Brand says. You took food, Ruth says. And the clock. That clock was county evidence, Brand says. It told time, Ruth says. Not law. Brand draws a folded notice from his coat. I do have paper. Back taxes. Liens a court date. Seems the farm owes more than a vow can wipe. We'll answer in daylight, Ruth says. Light doesn't love you, Brand says. It shows what men remember. Light shows what men did, Jace says. Brand's smile tilts. You talk brave for a hand with no herd. I have 2 hands, Jace says. They hold the door. Brand nods at the revolver again, and a sleepy toy. You can test if it snores, Jace says. No need, Brand says. County doesn't shoot new husbands. We tell them where to stand while we take measures. Ruth steps closer. Take 1 measure now, she says. Step off my porch. Brand looks past them into the room. Nice frame where a picture used to be. It broke, Ruth says. Or walked, Brand says. He tucks the notice against the door and presses the seal. Taxes due in 2 weeks. Court in a month. Bring your new man if you want him to read along. He reads fine, Ruth says. Brand turns his head toward the horses. Read this too, he says. When men owe a brand, the brand collects. Your late husband had debts that live longer than he did. Ruth's jaw tightens. He is not here to own me. The world thinks otherwise, Brand says. Widows and promises are soft clay. I'm fired hard, Ruth says. Try a hammer. A man shifts. Brand ignores him. He taps the door with 2 fingers. You signed because you think paper is a gate. Paper is a leash when we hold the other end. Who is we? Jace asks. County. Bank. Folks who keep barns from burning and roads from turning to pits. He smiles. People who count votes. People who took what wasn't theirs, Ruth says. That's a story, Brand says. Records sit. You want the land, Jace says. The county wants order, Brand says. The Brand wants herds. Sons of men who own the ridge want to breathe like their fathers did. Rot, Ruth says. A word with a smell, Brand says. He tips his hat. We'll be back with more paper. And a man who smiles less than I do. He doesn't care for doors. Bring him, Jace says. We'll be here. Brand gazes at the revolver once more. Make sure your toy's awake. He turns. Boys. The porch empties. The horses move, and the branded saddles sway like flags. Dust falls. Silence seals the house. Tight, Jace shuts the door and throws the chain. His breath shakes and stops. Ruth stands with her hands flat on the table. A fly works a window that won't open. He'll come at night, Jace says. He'll come with morning, Ruth says. He wants faces watching. You scared? I'm tired, she says. Tired is another word for done. Jace nods. He looks at the dead frame on the wall. What started this? Ruth looks at the floor near the stove. She kneels and works at a loose board with her fingers. It lifts with a dry sigh. She reaches down and brings up a tied bundle of letters. These, she says. These started the ruin. The board gives, and Jace lifts the bundle. Paper rubs against paper with a dry hiss. He smells well water and smoke. Ruth watches from the chair, hands still, eyes on the string he is about to cut. He keeps his breath steady and slices the knot. Letters loosen and fan across the table. He reads the first one. Ink has bled into the fibers. The courthouse crest sits faint in the corner. He hears the office door in his head, the clerk, who would not look up. The lines are neat and tired. The words name dates, the road, the cousin with a red scarf. He feels Ruth, watching him read what she already knows. I told the truth, and they chose the story that hurt less. Ruth says. Who killed him? Jace asks. His cousin, sheriff's friend. Jace nods once. He sets the page aside and picks up the next. Wax pooled and dried hard. Water warped the edge but did not erase the facts. He sees a name he knows from fences and bars. He sees Brand's neat mark under a note that says received, nothing else. Why keep them? He asks. Because shame eats paper slower than it eats a person. He studies the stack. Some are copies of what she sent to the court. Some are notes to herself, plain and careful. He finds a scrap with a rough map torn from a feed sack. A small circle sits by fence marks. A child's ribbon ties through a hole at the top, faded and pink. Ruth's finger touches it and stops. He died there, Jace says. Something down. There keeps the sound. The room seems to lean toward that scrap. He folds it and sets it with the others. He thinks of wells gone bad, the taste that will not leave the tongue. He thinks of the rope he cut and the weight that left his hands when the noose hit dirt. He looks at Ruth. She holds steady like a post. Outside, a hymn drifts from the revival tent on the ridge, off-key and sweet. The sound climbs the rafters and settles with the dust. We take this to a judge, he asks. He plays cards with the same men who came through my door. Then we make a room, they fear. Ruth's face does not change. What room? A room where eyes have to tell the truth. A room men built for themselves. We stand there with these letters and say them out loud. We do not ask if they hear. We make them answer. You think the hall will hold them, she says. I think. We hold the hall, he says. Ruth looks at the badge on the table, the one he pulled from the porch post to stop its ticking. You want a church? I want walls that do not drink lies. A church, the feed hall, or the place where men buy, votes with buyer. The judge will call it a mob. Let him. He can watch a town, listen. Ruth lifts another letter and reads a line about the cousin's boots by the well. Mud the color of clay, a buckle that caught the moon. Jace can see Brand nodding to a bent story. He wants to go now. The letters say, go careful. You're dead man, Jace says. Was he kind? He was two people, she says. One who sang, one who took. The one who met the cousin on the road and never came back. I won't make a saint out of him. Good, she says. Truth needs air, not a statue. He stacks the letters again, careful to keep their order. He ties the string with a square knot. He wants to press a seal with the coffee cup. He leaves the wax alone. Marks made in anger read wrong later. The hymn swells and fades. The house feels small and clean. He pockets the map scrap and slides the bundle into his coat. He checks the revolver. It looks dull and ready. He looks at Ruth. Her mouth is thin and sure. We take the long path, he says. No roads where men can wait. We go by the fence line, she says. The grass will throw our steps. He pulls on his coat and listens to the quiet until it feels like a nod back. Ruth sets the lifted board down but does not nail it. What do we tell them when they ask why we dig up old talk? He asks. That the ground kept the truth, she says. We're just going to pick it up. They step into the yard. Night clings with the light up. The well waits dark and round, as if it had been listening all along. They stand over the stones. The wellhead is rough and cold, circles of rock slick with old water. Night holds its breath around them. Jace studies the rope groove in the lip, a healed cut. Ruth lifts the faded ribbon tied twice at the post. It used to be red. The field behind them is empty and listening. He feels the town at his back and the letters in his pocket, heavier than the gun. He said he'd quit them, Ruth says. Men love quitting until the sun shows, Jace says. He told me the cousin had a way to make money quick. A few nights, he said. Then he'd wash his hands and sing again. What did he do? Drove cattle that weren't ours. Carried lies to doors. Hid names under other names. When he drank, he said the cousin wore luck like a jacket. And sober. He said he was tired of sneaking. He said the cousin kept a ledger of weak men. Jace leans on the stones and peers down. The well smells like iron. Air rises, cold as a cellar. He can't see the bottom, only a darker dark. Somewhere water moves against stone in a slow circle. I begged the pastor, Ruth says. He said grief makes women theatrical. Then let's make theater that hangs a man, Jace says. The ribbon flutters in wind that doesn't touch their faces. Jace takes a coin from his pocket, holds it over the mouth, and lets it go. They listen. It falls without touching anything. They can hear. The sound never comes. The ground keeps secrets, Ruth says. So do men, Jace says. He said he'd meet the cousin here to say he was done. I told him there is nothing to explain. He kissed my hair and left anyway. You heard him after, Jace asks. I hear him now. She closes her eyes. He told me to run. I stayed. You're staying again, but I'm here now, Jace says. Ruth dips her head toward the dark. He said, forgive me, she says. He said, it wasn't supposed to be this. Jace cups his hands. He throws his voice. We know, he calls. We're not leaving. The dark gives him back his own sound, dragged over gravel, older, thinned. We know we're not leaving. His skin lifts. He does it again, softer. Tell us what you kept. The well answers in a breath that might be wind. Don't tell. It is not a word as much as a shape his bones accept. Ruth's fingers tighten on the ribbon until the knot bites her. He wasn't afraid of God, Ruth says. He was afraid of what the cousin knew how to do and leave no bruise. Jace studies the stones leaning into one another like backs on a bench. He imagines hands on shoulders, a mouth covered, a prayer left half built. He hears the coins still falling. He cannot stand that idea. We should pull a bucket, he says. There's no bucket, Ruth says. They took it last winter. He listens for a second apology, a joke the dead might make to keep from crying. All he gets is the hymn from the ridge, off-key and sweet, a sound that wants to make you forgive too fast. It slides through the trees and pools around the stones. He said he'd quit them, Ruth repeats. Men love quitting until the sun shows. Jay says again, and he hates the truth in it. A shape moves behind the cottonwoods. No footsteps, only a sleeve brushing bark. Jace does not turn his head. His hand drops to the revolver until his thumb finds the worn notch above the grip. Brand's boys, he says. Not yet, Ruth says. He likes crowds. Then we've got something worse, Jace says. Ruth straightens. Talk, she says to the well. Say what you would not say alive. The air in the shaft changes colder, cleaner. Jace hears two syllables he cannot hold. Ruth hears her name and a word like sorry with a bone of another word under it. She steps back and seems older and younger in the same blink. We take this to the hall, Jace says tonight. They'll say, we brought the devil into town, she says. Good, he says. Let him hear his own echo. A lantern lights behind them, sudden and warm against their backs. Jace turns slow. Her dead husband's cousin steps out from the trees, smiling like he owns the dark. Ruth touches the ribbon, then lets it go. The well remembers, she says. So will we. Jace nods. We'll make them hear. He sets his boot against the stones, like taking an oath with his soul. No more doors kicked in, he says. No more quiet. For him, lantern glare cuts the trees and puts hard shine on the cousin's face. He holds it low so shadows climb him like vines. Ruth does not step back. Jace plants his boot on the well stones and feels the cold through his soul. The ribbon tied twice lifts without wind and falls again. The cousin's smile says he expects to be welcomed because he always has been. His voice lands soft and practiced. Widow, you look fed, Cousin Hale says. Ruth keeps her chin level. I feed myself now. Jace does not let the smile spread. State your business. Hale shows his empty hand like a dealer clearing the table, making peace. Hale's other hand drifts and touches the ribbon, rubbing the knot like it belongs to him. Jace's voice turns flat. Drop it, Hale. Looks pleased at the order. Everything drops in time. He lets the knot go and lifts the lantern so the light sits on their faces like a test. The well gives off cold-like breath from an animal that will not be named. Say what you came to say, Jace tells him. Hale sighs as if kindness is heavy. Supper, he says. At the Avery Ranch, the judge will be there. Sheriff, too. Folks who can make a clean path. Ruth's eyes do not change. What do they want? Your silence in a pretty dress, he says. Jace feels the letters in his coat like heat under cloth. He keeps his voice even. What do they offer? Hale's smile warms a degree, not dying ugly. The words sit and cool. Jace pictures a long table where men pass meat and law and call it fellowship. He also sees a door once locked behind a girl. He watches Hale's stance like a horse watches wire. We're not hungry for favors. Hale leans like a cousin at a wake. You are hungry for ease. You made paper today and turned a fight into a wedding. I'm offering a calm walk-off, a narrow plank. Ruth's eyes slide to the well mouth. She listens to something that is not wind. You came late, she says. Late is polite, Hale says. Gives folks a chance to think. Jace sees a notch fresh on Hale's boot heel and imagines rope burn on a different night. He moves his palm to the grip of his revolver and leaves it there so the act looks casual. Hale's smile flicks to the gun. That toy is asleep. It wakes, Jace says. Good, Hale says. Then we can all rest after. He steps closer until Jace can smell a clean shirt over saddle and smoke. Widow, he says, you look fed. It suits you. Ruth holds his eyes until his smile slips by a hair. I feed myself now. He nods like she checked a box on a form. Good. Then you'll like a night where men pour coffee and say sorry you had trouble. Jace keeps his bite behind his teeth. What happens if we don't show? Storms, Hale says. paper that blooms like mold, visits accidents, old stories retold. I am offering whether you can walk in. Clean for who? Jace asks. Hale lists without shame, for everybody who matters. Judge Avery wants order. Sheriff wants numbers that stack. The brand wants the ridge. You too can keep a corner, if you stop pointing at Cousins. Ruth says, You like pointing at me. Hale smiles again. I like using your name in a prayer. His fingers drift toward the ribbon. Jace's hand shifts and stops. Hale's eyes shine. He lets the knot be. We should all pray before supper, he says. Jace's breath stays steady. We'll speak in daylight, loud, where every ear has to choose. Light doesn't love you, Hale says. It shows what men prefer to remember. Ruth folds her arms. I accept, on one condition, she says. Hale brightens like a lamp. Name it. She nods toward the dark square of her house beyond the fence line. At my table first. You'll eat bread I bless. Then we go. Hale tilts his head at the word bless, like it pinched. You'll eat bread I bless, she repeats. He gives a thin bow. Amen. Jace, here's something hinge in that word. A door chosen, while the other door closes without noise. Hale rocks on his heels. I'll write and tell them to set a place. Judge likes his coffee dark. Nobody moves. The lantern pops, air climbs. The shaft and tastes like iron on their tongues. A hymn rolls down from the ridge, off-key and sweet, the kind that makes people forgive the wrong person. Hale lifts the lantern to glare their eyes one more time. Don't keep me waiting, he says. Waiting makes me careless. Jace believes that part. Hale steps back and the cottonwoods take him. The light thins and is gone. Night sets. It's wait again. Jace listens for footsteps and hears only leaves thinking about it. Trap, he says. Dressed in manners, Ruth says. He nods. We go anyway. We go, she says. But my way first. They move by the fence line, where the grass throws their steps back into itself. The house waits like a held breath and lets them in. Inside, Ruth lights the stove. The room grows a small red heart. She breaks a loaf that smells like what the world forgot and salts the crust slow. Steam fogs the small window and draws a finger of water down the glass. Jace sets 2 plates and a third upside down. He lays the letters by his elbow with a map scrap on top. He thinks we want easy, he says. He thinks I want forgiveness, she says. Do you? I want a room where men have to look at what they did, she says. Supper can be that room, Jace says, if we make it. Ruth touches the loaf like a bell. Sit, she says. He sits where he can see the door and the window both. The stove ticks as iron settles. Outside a horse shifts, and a bridle rings. A chair creaks on the porch, slow and rude. Ruth does not look at Jace. She salts the crust again, a thin white line like chalk. The door opens to men who never knocked out chairs. Scrape hats, stay on. The stove draws a red breath, while Ruth salts the bread. Jace sits where he can see door and window. A single nail lies by his right hand. Sheriff Brand takes the chair that creaks loudest. Judge Collier smooths his vest, stares at his reflection in a spoon. Cousin Hale stands at the window and watches the yard, though the well sits beyond sight. Eat, or leave, no preaching, Ruth says. We are officers of peace, Judge Collier says. You're officers of habit, Jace says. Brand places his hat brim up. We heard you tied a knot without asking. You asked me nothing when you took, Ruth says. Hale smiles like a man waiting on cake. We're here to be friendly. Friendship eats last, Jace says. He nudges the nail to the right. One lie. Ruth sets 3 plates and keeps 1 4 letters. Bread is blessed, she says. No toasts. Brand tears a piece. Your husband drowned. He bled, Ruth says. Jace moves the nail. 2. The county grieves, Collier adds. You grieve the noise of trouble, Jace says. 3. Hall chews and watches the glass. Noisy things can be calmed. Quiet hid what you did, Ruth says. Brand folds his piece. We came to save you from court. Paper can get real creative. Your paper drew a noose, Jace says. He leaves the nail where it is. Collier sips coffee. Let us buy the land and end this. You'll have a tidy stake and no more fuss. You already took the house and my body. You don't get the dirt, Ruth says. Hale laughs soft. You married a scarecrow. Scarecrows keep birds honest, Jace says. The nail stays still. Brand leans in. Your man wandered. He drank. He fell. He met your friend at the well and said he was done. He bled where the stones slope, Ruth says. Citation, Collier says, pleased at the word. Ruth lifts. The floorboard with the notch by the stove would size. She brings a tied bundle and sets it on the plate where Hale just ate. The ribbon is the color of an old apple. Here, she says. Collier clears his throat. These are private. They were when I sent them. Then you let them rot, Ruth says. Jace slides the top letter toward Collier. Your crest, your stamp, your silence. He does not touch the nail. Brand reaches and stops when Ruth looks at his hand. Read, she tells Collier. Collier reads 2 lines, then looks up like the print insulted him. Allegations. Truth, Jace says, and he moves the nail back to center. Hale's gaze stays on the window. Widow the well keeps stories. Men forget. Why not choose forgetting? I did, for one day, she says. It tasted like dirt. Brand shifts. You won't like what comes from making a show. You like what comes from making one, Jace says. 4. He pushes the nail. Ruth breaks the loaf and hands pieces. Like she is counting heads. Eat, she says again. No speeches. Collier chews. You want safety. You want room to grieve. The county can provide both, if you sign. I signed a man into my house, Ruth says. That is the only room you don't get. Hale tips his head. He won't stand when the light turns hard. He stood in the dark, Ruth says, and he stays. Brand points with bread. This one has no herd, no wage, no past. He has both hands and a name, Ruth says. The cousin did not kill your husband, Collier says with calm. He thinks wholly. Jace taps the nail. 5. Hale lets the calm pass. I offered you supper at Avery. You can take it and be done. We set rules here, Ruth says. Eat or leave. No preaching. Brand bristles. You don't order officers. I order my table, she says. Collier dabs his lips and smiles. Tomorrow, Avery Ranch. We resolve. The bank will be present. A witness or two. You will have your say in a proper room. Jace hears resolve like a lid. We'll bring the letters and read them out. They will be entered as feelings, Collier says. Paper has bones, Jace says. He keeps the nail where it is. Hale rises. He sets his plate, pleased with his manners. You look fed, he tells Ruth. I feed myself, she says. Brand stands, chair legs scraping stripes in the floor. Wear the dress that makes folks kind. I wear what I can run in, Ruth says. Collier collects his hat and fixes the brim. He smiles. Tomorrow then, we will resolve. He lifts his cup, but Ruth stares until he lowers it. The lantern blows out. His smile stays in the dark, like chalk on a wall tonight. Sun burns along porcelain and draws a tight ring around every plate. Eyes rest on Ruth, as if she were a dish to be passed. The Avery dining room stretches long, polished, and hungry for agreement. Silver waits in straight rows. The great shows flame more than heat. Jace stands behind Ruth's chair with the letters inside his coat, thumb on the string. Brand and Collier sit at mid-table. Hale chooses the seat that sees door and window. At the head, Mrs. Avery holds the room without moving. A woman is a house for peace, Mrs. Avery says. I'm a door, Ruth says. Jace keeps his voice low. We can leave, Ruth answers lower. We came to be heard. Mrs. Avery looks at the loaf, then at Ruth's mouth. You were heard last night. Let this house be generous. Eat and be wise. Collier smiles like a man done with a chore. We can seal this. Brand lifts an empty cup. We can bless it. Hale does not blink. We can finish it. Ruth looks at him. You finished him at the well. Silence holds. The fire ticks and returns to show. Jace notes how the men glance at Mrs. Avery when they want the air to move. She gives it with a small nod. Men tied to bad luck drown in stories. Mrs. Avery says, This house will not open to wind and grief. We will fix what can be fixed. Start with the well, Ruth says. The well is a whole brand. Says it remembers, Ruth says. Jace studies the oil painting above the mantel. Founders watch like saints. One clutches a ledger to his ribs. The paint shines where fingers pointed for years. He wonders what numbers live in a room like this and what faces get erased when they add up clean. A servant girl slips behind Ruth with a tray. Her sleeve brushes Ruth's arm. A folded scrap drops into her lap without sound. Ruth opens it under the table and reads the pencil line. Don't drink. She slides her goblet aside and keeps her face quiet. Jace leans a fraction. They want the letters, he says. They want my mouth closed, Ruth says. Mrs. Avery taps a glass with the back of a spoon. The sound runs thin as wire. Say grace, she says. Grace is not for thieves, Ruth says. Hale's smile falters and returns. He watches the window like he can see the well from here. We can seal this, Collier repeats. No need to stir a town up. You can bless it, Brand adds. We can finish it, Hale says, soft as a promise. Ruth sets both hands on the table. You finished him at the well, she repeats. Say the truth and eat. Mrs. Avery folds her hands. Child, you wear dust like a coat. Put it down here. We will give you a kinder name. We will make you a widow people bring pies to. I feed myself, Ruth says. I keep my name. Brand drags his chair until a leg screeches. Rough talk ruins a woman's chance to survive. Rough acts already tried, Ruth says. Collier turns to Jace. You are new. Settle her. There is no victory here for you. There is ease. Ease is not what we came for, Jace says. Mrs. Avery lifts her gaze to Jace's chest as if she can feel paper through wool. Bring your bundle out, she says. Paper belongs in rooms like this. Paper belongs where it was sent, Ruth says. You let it rot, Hale brightens. Widow, if you sing, we will clap. If you bake, we will buy. If you bow, we will name you good. All this by sundown. I will not bake my own gag, Ruth says. Enough, Mrs. Avery says, voice never rising. Here is the path. Sign for a fair price. Keep the cottage by the creek. Let the brand repair fences and set the herd right. We will speak of your pain kindly and bring you chairs when you sit. Ruth studies the neat silver rows. She remembers her spoons turning backward when uninvited hands came near. She smells the well on the letters, though they are tied. No, she says. Mrs. Avery's mouth thins. Then we will speak of your stubbornness as a problem. Collier pats his vest. We can seal this. No one need know. Everyone will know, Jace says. We will read aloud. Brand smiles without teeth. We will bless a final word at sundown. After that, talk grows teeth you cannot feed. Hale draws a slow circle on the linen with one finger. We can finish it, he repeats, friendly. Ruth lifts the bundle from inside Jace's coat before he can stop her. She sets the letters in the center of the table where meat should sit, under the saint with the ledger. Start reading, she says. Mrs. Avery's eyes cool. You forget where you are. I remember, Ruth says. I remember a bed checked for strangers and a clock taken as county evidence. I remember a cousin smiling at a well. Hale's smile tightens for a beat, the room can feel. He reaches for his cup and finds it empty. Mrs. Avery taps the glass. Again. Say grace, she says. No one moves. Ruth pushes her goblet farther away. Jace places his palm on the table edge and feels how easy it would be to turn the whole thing over. He waits to see who reaches first. Hale moves. Polite is gone. He lunges for the letters with a hand that has done this before. Jace drives his weight forward and knocks the table into the fire grate. China leaps and breaks. The cloth rides like a wave and slaps. Flames lick the linen and die under ash. The painting swings on one rusted nail and tilts, the ledger catching. Light like an accusation. Brand curses. Collier scrambles for his hat. Mrs. Avery does not rise. She holds the wreck with both hands flat and a smile made of iron. Enough, Mrs. Avery says, quiet as a blade. Habit pulls the men back into their chairs. Sit. Hale sits with a tight jaw. Brand sits slower. Collier tucks his napkin as if that could mend the break. Ruth keeps the letters near her plate. Jace plants his boots the way you plant posts. The founders stare sideways from their crooked frame. We will not drink, Ruth says. We will. Speak. Mrs. Avery folds her hands and nods once. Speak, then, she says, voice thin and sure. And be ready to pay the price you name. Hale lunges. Ledger swings on rust. Smoke threads the room and ash freckles the cloth. The frame lies on the floor, saints in oil staring sideways from the rug. Jace hears the scrape fade and the hush that chases it. Ruth stands at his shoulder, steady as a post. Brand mutters. Collier smooths his vest. Hale smiles. Mrs. Avery keeps both hands flat on the table. They kept their God behind a picture, Jace says. Open it, Ruth says. You don't have a warrant, Collier says. Or a prayer, Brand adds. Jace kneels at the black square the painting left. His knife finds a seam under an iron lip. The wood gives a dry groan. Plaster powders. His knuckles. Careful with history, Hale says. History is careful with nobody, Ruth says. The plate loosens. Jace pries until the hidden door swings. Cold air climbs out. A safe sits cut into the studs, paint trimmed neat around it. He tests the dial. Mrs. Avery's eyes don't blink. That is private property, Collier says. It holds county property, Jace says. He drives the knife into the hinge gap. Levers slow, resets, levers harder. Pins shear with a hard pop. The door jumps. A smell of paper, oil, and old rain spills the room. On top rests a badge with dried mud in the stars' points. Under it, another badge, edge blackened like it kissed a fire. A ribbon tied twice lies coiled beneath, red gone to brown. Beneath them, ledgers sit fat and patient, leather cracked from handling. That's his, Ruth says. It could be anybody's, Brand says. Then wear it, Jace says. He flips the badge. It skids to Brand, taps his cup, stops. Brand doesn't touch it. Jace lifts a ledger and opens to the middle. Neat ink rows march across the page. Dates, names, sums, a fishhook mark beside some. Margins hold little maps where fences moved without. Neighbors present. He turns a page and finds women's names. Several carry a bold asterisk. Asterisks are stars you bury, Ruth says. Collier clears his throat like he can grind the letters down. You don't know what any of that means. It means money paid to quiet, Jace says. Land traded while a man is called drunk, or dead, or grateful. County records are complex. Simple here, Jace says. He flips forward and finds Hale named with Ruth's husband on a night-marked weather incident. The sum could buy fences for years. 3 initials sit after the word recovery. Ruth takes the second badge. The burnt edge smudges her thumb. She wipes it on her dress and does not look at the stain. How many men did this shine on while they looked away? She says. Mrs. Avery smiles without heat. Put it back. Jace reads again. A page names the well as a boundary marker. Below. It visits labeled maintenance. Each payment signed to Hale. Another page ties church candles to election tallies. A girl's name appears twice with 2 asterisks, and a note that says, relocation, physician. Put it back, Mrs. Avery repeats. Softer, Widow Hale says, almost gentle. Think on what you stand to lose if you parade this mess. I stood to lose my skin and kept it, Ruth says. Parade beats a quiet grave. Collier points. Those are drafts. None signed. You'll look like fools chasing ink. Then we read, Jace says, out loud. Tonight. Tent. Yard. Feed. Hall. Let faces answer their own names. Brand looks to Mrs. Avery. She lifts one finger, and the far end of the table shifts. Jace closes the ledger and loops the ribbon around it. One knot, then a second. For memory. He pockets the muddy badge. It fits like a bruise that already knows him. Put it back, Mrs. Avery says a third time. The air goes thin. No, Jace says. Mrs. Avery's smile steadies. There are ways to account for this. Paper wanders, fire visits. People forget. The well doesn't, Ruth says. Hale steps in close. Cowboy, listen. You got yourself a new name today. Don't spend it all by sundown. Names grow back when truth drinks, Jace says. Collier sets both palms flat. We can still seal this. We can bless it, Brand says. We can finish it, Hale adds. Ruth looks to the doorway where the servant girl stands with a tray like a shield. The girl's eyes are wide but steady. Ruth speaks without turning. If Grace lives in this house, it is hiding. Mrs. Avery whispers, almost kind. Child, put it back. Eat. Be wise. The great size. He hears a horse. Stamp somewhere beyond the glass. Brand, Jace says, nodding at the badge on the linen. Try it on. Brand does not move. That thing's dirty. So is your paper, Jace says. Still counts. Mrs. Avery draws one thin breath. Last time, she says. Put it back. Jace doesn't. He turns to the servant girl and holds the ledger out, so the ribbon bites his fingers. She slides the tray under the book and takes its weight. He steps closer and places it square into her palms. Right now, not on the tray, making the ribbon cut a line across her skin. Back door, he whispers to her courage, not her ears. Hale's hand twitches. Boy, don't. Run, Jace, says footsteps, slice the corridor, and pile in the house's throat. Breath sits in every mouth. The servant girl bolts with the ledger pressed to her chest. Jace drags 2 chairs and jams them under the latch. Ruth angles a heavy chair against the knob until the wood complains. Brand rises slow, hand on his gun. Collier sputters about law. Mrs. Avery does not stand. Hale smiles like rehearsal. Don't be foolish, Collier says. This is burglary. It's rescue, Ruth says. From what? Brand asks. From the quiet you like, Jace says. Give her to us, Hale says. Come, take her, Ruth says. A servant shouts from the kitchen. China ticks where it fell. Jace shoves a sideboard against the second door. Ruth watches the window. She cannot see the well, but feels it leaning. She'll go past the peaches, she says. She'll be quick, Jace says. Not quicker than men who care to be paid, Hale says. You already were, Ruth says. Brand steps up. Open it. No, Jace says. Brand lifts his revolver. You're making this violent. You made it quiet first, Jace says. Mrs. Avery folds her hands. Child, she calls, bring back what is not yours. It was mine before you hid it, Ruth says. County property, Collier says. County secret, Ruth says. Hale rams the chair. It skids a hand's breadth. Jace resets it with one boot. You'll break the finish, Jace says. You'll break, Hale says. Brand thumbs the hammer. Collier edges left. Jace shoots the chandelier. Glass rains. Flame drops and dies. Smoke spreads. Darkness takes courage's shape. I can still see you, Hale says. Then look, Ruth says. Gunpowder hangs. Jace hears boots in the yard. He listens for the girl and catches a scrap of breath. Then hush. Sheriff Collier says, "End this." Brand fires at the ceiling and curses at the dust. "Last chance," he yells. "You said last chance too." "A lot of people," Ruth says. Hale slides toward the window. Jace moves the barrel and Hale stops, smiling for later. "Give her to us," Hale repeats. "She's not yours," Ruth says. "Everything here is on loan," Mrs. Avery says. "Then your time's due," Ruth says. The door shutters under Brand's shoulder. The chain strains and bites. Ruth watches splinters lift. Jace feels the house lean toward the well, as if stones tied a rope here. When it opens, "Stay behind me," he says. "No," she says. Beside, pots crash in the kitchen. Back, Mrs. Avery calls. "Guard the drive." He thinks she ran for a horse, Ruth says. "She ran for trees," Jace says. The door gives a fist's width. Cold pours in. Jace pushes the chairs tighter. Brand reloads with shaking hands. "You won't leave this room free," Mrs. Avery says. "We lived in rooms like this our whole lives," Ruth says. "Walk out now," Mrs. Avery says, "and we will give back a name or two." "Give them to the well," Ruth says. "The well is a hole," Brand says. "It holds what you dropped," Jace says. A figure skims the window. The girl vanishes. Into the cottonwoods. Hale lunges. The latch screams. Brand stumbles into the angle where Ruth waits. She brings the chair down on his forearm. The gun skitters Jace, kicks it farther, and covers him. "You're making this violent," Brand says. "You made it quiet first," Jace says. Hale breathes hard. Collier flattens to the wall. Mrs. Avery watches like weather. Boots hit the porch. The chain tears free. The front door swings wide. Night waits there, thick and close. Half the town stands on the porch and yard, faces turned to light and smoke, unsure who they came to watch. A hymn note hangs and dies. Cold rides the room like breath with a job. "You want quiet or truth," Jace says. "Pick." Murmurs shift. A woman says, "Read." A man says, "Hush." Another, "Let them speak." "Bring the girl," Hale calls. "Bring what she stole." "She carried what you hid," Ruth says. Mrs. Avery steps to the threshold. "Go home," she says. "This is family business." "We are the family," someone answers. Brand cradles his arm. "You'll pay for this." "I paid already," Ruth says. Jace lifts the second bundle from Ruth's dress and holds it up so the porch can see the crest and dates. "Tonight," he says, "we read." "You won't leave this room free," Hale says. Ruth lifts her chin. "We lived in rooms like this our whole lives," she says. "We're done." The porch settles. Night leans in. Beyond the cottonwoods, a girl runs with a ledger to her heart, fast enough to teach the town what it has to hear next. Jace steps to the threshold without crossing it, letters held high. "These are names," he says. "Some belong to you. Some belong to your daughters." The words land and do not roll. Collier tugs his vest. "Neighbors, be calm," he says. "We will handle this proper." Brand lifts his chin. Back away from the porch. No one moves. Hale eases toward the window and finds Jace's barrel waiting. He laughs without sound. Ruth sets her palm on the table. "Eat or leave," she says. No preaching. A murmur answers. Time. Stand off in open air. Porch boards hold every foot. Smoke slides out and meets night. Women hold babies. Men hold hats. The well hums behind the cottonwoods like a choir. Ruth steps forward so the door is behind her, not between. Jace stands at her shoulder with the letters. Brand cradles his arm. Collier polishes a spoon. Hale watches the lane. Mrs. Avery takes the threshold. They called me liar to protect their dinners, Ruth says. We heard you, a woman says. Hearing isn't help, Ruth says. Jace cuts the hush. Who owns your fear? An old man on the steps says. The ones with ink. They own the telling. They wrote me wrong, Ruth says. They wrote me quiet. The servant girl breaks from the lane, breathless. Ledger hugged to her chest. It names you, she says. Brand points with his bad hand. That book is theft. So is my life, if you write it, Ruth says. Mrs. Avery steps onto the porch. Put it away. We will forgive. Forgiveness without confession is theater, Ruth says. Collier lifts both hands. Neighbors, we can make peace if we stop this street talk. Let the court listen tomorrow. You had your tomorrows, Ruth says. They sat under your cups and dripped. Hale opens his palm. Return what you took and come inside. We can begin again. You began at the well, Jace says. We finish on the porch. Brand scowls. This is a mob. This is a town before it remembers it, is afraid, Ruth says. A woman with flour on her wrist steps forward. We heard you, she says, softer. Hearing isn't help, Ruth says. Help is watching them answer their names. Help is walking with me when I go. It names you, the girl says again. It names your husband when he smiled wrong. It names your brother when he was paid to forget. It names the well. Mrs. Avery keeps her voice even. Child, put it away. We will forgive. Will you confess? The girl asks. We will. Be kind, Mrs. Avery says. Kindness without truth is a glove over a fist, Ruth says. Jace feels the porch decide and undecide. Brand steps. Back away, he says to the girl. Hale looks toward the side path. Give her to us. Come take her, Ruth says. The hum deepens, a note you cannot ignore. Jace raises the letters. These name land taken and mouths shut, he says. These say why your son's wages sank and who counted votes with candles and a smile. Rumor, Collier says. Jace shows the crest. Record. Mrs. Avery almost smiles. We can forgive. We can settle. No one needs a scene. But a scene needs you, Ruth says. Stand in it and say his name. Whose? Mrs. Avery asks. Your cousin's, Ruth says. And the men he eats with. The girl stops at the step and holds the ledger like water. Ruth takes it with hands. We walk now, Ruth says. To where? Someone asks. The courthouse, Ruth says. We will read. If your name sleeps in here, wake it yourself. Mrs. Avery moves closer. Put it away. We will forgive. Ruth shakes her head. Forgiveness without confession is theater. Theater is what crowds understand, Hale says. Then let them understand, Ruth says. Walk with me, she tells the girl. The dog barks once and quiets like it heard a command from underground. Brand slides to block the steps. Jace moves with him. Move, Jace says. I'll arrest you, Brand says. Do it in daylight, Jace says. Collier pleads. Go. Home. Tomorrow we will handle this in order. An old woman answers. Order is why my boy left. A young man says. Let them read. Porch boards complain. Night waits for the first foot to choose. Ruth sets her boots on the top step and breathes like someone checking a bridge. They called me liar to protect their dinners, she says again. I fed myself in rooms where men took what they wanted and called it county. I told the truth, and you chose the story that hurt less. Choose different. A farmhand by the gate nods. If it names me, he says, I'll hear it. It names you, the girl says. It names all of us, one way or another. Mrs. Avery lifts her hand. Put it away. We will forgive. Ruth does not. She looks at Jace. He answers. We can leave. We came to be heard, she answers. Lower Brand lifts his chin. Back away from the porch. No, Ruth says. Step aside. or stand in front of what comes. Hale smiles at the crowd. Neighbors, a woman is a house for peace. I'm a door, Ruth says. We're going through. Jace turns to the yard and raises the letters. These are names, he says. Some belong to you. Some belong to your daughters. Silence arranges itself. The well hums one held note. Ruth tucks the ledger and steps down. The town falls in behind like weather that knows where it is going. Steps, dust, words like stones. The courthouse doors stay shut like eyes that won't see. Ruth walks at the front with the ledger under her arm. Jace moves beside her with badges. The town follows in a hush with teeth. The girl keeps pace, breath thin, eyes set. In Jace's pocket the sheriff's badge turns heavy. I will not speak what I cannot prove. I can prove this, Ruth says. Read, Jace says. The girl lifts her voice. Payments to Pastor H. Receipts from Judge C. Badge signed by B. Brand forces through the line. This is slander. Slander is for lies, Ruth says. Collier smooths his vest. We are the law. Then you can stand trial with it, Jace says. They pass the closed doors and make the road a room. Ruth opens the ledger to money for silence. She reads the date, the sum, the names that bought quiet. Men flinch. Women nod without smiling. Neighbors, go home, Brand calls. Home is where you came to take, a woman answers. Hale rides in from the side road with 2 men. Enough. Marching, he says. Come bend this back under a roof. The roof failed us, Ruth says. Collier lifts his hands. We can convene tomorrow and accept filings. We convene now, Jace says. You brought us paper when we asked for faces. We brought you faces. They halt at the square where wagons turn. Ruth climbs a crate. Jace lays the letters at her boots. The girl holds the page so Wind cannot speak. Read the next, Ruth says. Maintenance at the well, the girl reads. Sums to Hale, notes by Brand. Witness lines blank. A star beside a woman's name, Brand's jaw. Knots, coincidence? Jace holds up the badge with dried mud. Found in your house, he says to Mrs. Avery. With county ledgers. Mrs. Avery does not blink. Drafts that mean nothing. Drafts don't bleed, Ruth says. Hale, edges close. You'll end alone if you keep this up. I ended alone already. Now I am not, Ruth says. From half a mile off the wells, sound curls over the road. Ruth reads a line about a fence pushed in the night and the price a widow paid to set it straight. A woman says, that was me. You are not a court. Collier says, this is a court of the road. Jace says, law travels when buildings lock. Order is not a parade. Brand says, order is not a closed door. Ruth says, iron shoes ring from the far side. A rider appears with a ribboned document. He sees the crowd first, the ledger second. I was invited to dinner, the emissary says. You came to a funeral, Ruth says. What died? Quiet, Jace says. Hale lifts a hand. Sir, this is disorder sparked by grief. Papers were stolen. Papers were found, Ruth says, behind a picture in a rich wall. The emissary studies Brand's arm and Collier's. Smile. He nods at the book. What are you reading? Payments and names, Ruth says. Rooms where girls went and came back smaller. Wages that shrank when votes rose. Bring it to the courthouse and we will review, he says. The doors are shut, Jace says. Keys exist. Keys live in hands that hid these pages, Ruth says. The crowd breathes like one chest. Do we go to the door again? She asks. No, someone says. Here, another says. Now, many answer. This is slander, Brand tries. Again. Slander is for lies, Ruth says. I will not speak what I cannot prove. I can prove this. The emissary reads a line, then another. Who holds accountability here? You, if you like your job, Jace says. Mrs. Avery's voice is steady. Do not be taken in by theater. The county is sound. The county is quiet, because it paid for quiet, Ruth says. We will not pay any more. Hale tells the people, think of your own names. Close the book before it finds you. It already did. The girl says. Wind flips pages. Ruth steadies the book. Jace shows. The burnt badge. This stood in a fire and kept its number, he says. So will we. The emissary lowers the ribboned paper. Read, he says. Ruth reads until the sun leans low and shows everything plain. Men flinch. Women nod without smiling. The badge grows heavier with each name. Ruth closes the book. Do we go to the door again? She asks a second time. No, the crowd answers. Here, a woman says. Now, the old man says. Ruth steps down. She walks to the courthouse steps. She places the ledger on the stone. Wind turns a page to the list of girls with asterisks. Jace lays the badge beside it, like a witness that cannot be bought now. Ledger open, badge down. Ruth stands on the courthouse, steps with the book like a brick that fits her hands. Jace stays beside her, as if the wind could shove, and he would answer it. The crowd breathes together. Mrs. Avery faces the steps with her calm tied tight. You think this ends me? I think it ends that, Ruth says, and tips her chin toward the shut doors and the ledger's neat rows that made pain polite. Collier smooths his vest. Close the book. Write a new one, Ruth says. Law will not be mocked, Collier says. Law was hidden, Jace says. We brought it out. Women step forward and touch the ledger like a relic, not to worship, but to witness. A mother names the page where her girl's asterisk sits. A storekeeper points to sums that shaved every payday thin. The book does not argue. A baby cries. A dog won't stop staring at the well. Brand unpins his badge. It trembles, then drops. To the step like a shot. I was afraid, he says. Small. We all were. Be useful now, Jace says. The emissary lifts a ribboned document. Seizure of ledgers. Suspension of office. Temporary custody of records. He reads, then signs. He raises it high. The crowd reads it aloud. Assets held. Records released. Mrs. Avery does not blink. You think words unmake a house. No, Ruth says. They make a town. Hale edges near, with his careful smile. There's still time to keep peace. Peace is the word men use when they want the hurt quiet, Ruth says. He reaches for the ledger. 3 neighbors catch his wrists. They wrap him with rope, the same rope Jace cut, while he laughs without joy. Let me go, he snaps. I won't hang for this. No, Ruth says. You'll live where everyone knows your name. Brand, stripped of shine, steps between Hale and boots that want to kick. Smoke pulls eyes upward. In a courthouse window the matriarch's portrait catches. Flame climbs like a slow verdict, eating guilt. Mrs. Avery watches her painted self burn and never breaks posture. You think this ends me, she says again. It ends that, Ruth says. Collier reaches for the book. Ruth pulls it to her chest. I will not speak what I cannot prove, she says. I can prove this. Bring it inside, the emissary urges. Doors are shut less now. We hold court where doors failed, Jace says. Ruth turns to the town. This ledger is not holy. It is a mirror. If it holds you, say so. If it breaks you, let it. A man from the mill lifts a hand. My mark, he says. I took money to forget. I remember. A girl says, my sister. 2 stars. Bran looks at his empty palm. I was afraid. Jace nods. Be useful now. The emissary stamps. The seizurean looks at Collier. You are relieved pending inquiry. He looks at Brand. Turn in your sidearm. Brand sets the gun on the step. It sounds like a door finally shutting. Hale twists the rope and grins. You'll choke on victory. I'm done choking, Ruth says. Mrs. Avery steps forward, serene. Put it away. We will forgive. Forgiveness without confession is theater, Ruth says. Confession feeds gossip, Mrs. Avery says. Truth feeds repair, Ruth says. Wind flips the ledger to the list of girls, with asterisks. Ruth places her palm there until the page lies flat. She looks at Jace. They mocked the lonely cowboy. He married me. He didn't save me. He stood with me. Jace meets the eyes he used to avoid. We saved each other. You cannot scrub names off a family with one day of noise, Mrs. Avery says. Noise wakes the house, Ruth says. Let it stay awake. Close the book. Collier pleads again. Write a new one, Ruth says, and turns so the town can hear. She tears off copies and passes them down. Hands take them like news. They walk to the cottonwoods with jars washed clean. The girl tucks photocopies into each and screws lids until they squeak. Ruth knots a fresh rope and lowers the jars into the well. 3, then 4. Proof sent into the deep where echoes keep. At her gate, she wipes the plank and presses a new nameplate onto the post. She pushes until the nails bite and hold. It carries one word that belongs to no family but to the living home. The wind stills, not in peace, but in room. The well lets sound leave and does not send it back. Ruth feels the space that opens when a town turns to daylight. She breathes. Jace breathes with her. The story ends without shouting, just the work of hands that will not be moved again.